Directed by Peter Weir and his character named Christoph, The Truman Show is produced as both a reality television show and a film that portrays a religious allegory surrounding the concept of man, creation, and the idea of life being controlled or, in a way, predetermined. Up until the end of the film, Truman Burbank, the main character and the only true man in his world, is trapped inside a live television set built as the fictional Sea Haven Island. Truman, from the start, is unaware that his life is being broadcast to the real world, or even that his emotions are being described by musical cues chosen by an outside director.
Made-up music.
As illustrated by the use of minimalist and classical music, Truman goes through each day of what seems to the audience like a fairly simplistic and perfect life. In his world, Truman has most things that all people would dream of having for themselves, such as a supportive spouse, a lifelong best friend, and a good house in a safe town. He experiences the typical daily routine of going to work, greeting his neighbors, and seeing the same people within this fictional community. But despite how ideal his life may seem, full of perfect sunsets and companionship, the thing that Truman most wants to do but can't seem to figure out is how to go away from Sea Haven to find something more to his life's purpose. This increasing desire Truman has to leave his closed-in life moves him throughout the film to becoming more suspicious of his community, ultimately resulting in his escape from Christoph's control at the end of the film. What's unique about music in The Truman Show is that instead of being used just as a production element, Peter Weir takes his film score in a rather uncommon direction by using different musical styles to support his story-within-a-story idea. In other words, his use of Burkhard Dallwitz and Philip Glass's minimalist music, alongside the inclusion of well-known classical music, work together to establish both the music of the TV show world as well as the music of the film. Our challenge when watching the film, as both Weir's and Christoph's audience, is figuring out what world the music cues belong to and how these cues are supposed to be portraying Truman's life and emotions. There are various examples of music throughout the film that overall agree with Gordman's theory that music in film adheres to the concept of inaudibility. This specifically referring to the 3 times where Mozart's Alla Turca plays in the background of Truman's morning routine, only meant to accompany Truman's actions rather than preside over them. However, there are other times, such as the reunion scene, where music in The Truman Show seems to be intentionally heard, calling this theory into question and ultimately adding to the uncertainty of whether or not the music is meant to connote specific ways that Truman feels. The continual debates over which side of the story each cue belongs to, and how both classical and minimalist music illustrate Truman's life, routines, and emotions, show that music in The Truman Show is used to parallel both the audience's challenge of recognizing what's real from what's controlled, and also Truman's inner conflict of uncovering the truth about his life. The ongoing question of musical diegesis, as represented in the reunion scene, is one of the most distinctive parts of The Truman Show because it presents the challenge that comes from distinguishing how music is functioning in a scene compared to how it's supposed to function.
Yep. I found him for you, Truman. That's why I came by tonight. Sure, he's got quite a story to tell. Go to him.
Easy on the fog. Stand by crane cam. Crane cam. Button cam 3.
Here, with embracing the minimalist style of repeating melodies and musical patterns, the music serves as Gordman's idea of film music as an emotional cue. The combination of low strings and piano indicate the dramatic quality of the scene and create an emotional depth that both the film's audience and Truman's audience are susceptible to. This is shown as people in the TV show's audience are seen holding their breath to find out what happens next to Truman in the midst of an encounter conducted by suspenseful, repetitive music. However, the illusion of non-diegetic music is suddenly overturned when the shot cuts to the studio headquarters with Christoph commanding instrumentalists to fade up music as we see a keyboardist in the studio headquarters playing the piano melody that accompanies Truman's embrace with his father. In this instance, since the music is shown in a diegetic way as being under Christoph's control, it is brought into question whether the emotional intensity of the scene was real to Truman or merely designed by the TV show's producers.
Dad.
Yes!
Largely due to the film cutting back and forth between the audience, the studio headquarters, and Truman, the reunion scene is a great example of how music plays a strong role in revealing the different levels of story world that exists in The Truman Show. While the style of music in this scene clearly portrays a heartwarming and emotional moment for Truman, the music itself might be more a representation of emotionalism without having anything to do with Truman's true feelings. Instead, as Eaton discusses in her essay on unheard minimalisms, it represents Christoph's power of musical control with portraying how he wants Truman to feel alongside how he thinks the audience of his TV show should feel. It makes sense that the audience is moved by the reunion scene because based on Truman's expressions, the slow, foreboding music seems to fit very well with how we might expect him to feel in the moment. For example, the polyphonic counter melodies of piano and strings may illustrate conflicting emotions of joy and sadness, but also disbelief and confusion when Truman sees his father, allowing any audience to feel at least somewhat sympathetic towards him. Here, Christoph's use of music as a signifier of emotion, as Gorban's theory assumes, effectively shows how music is sometimes the best way to express feelings without using words. The music, despite being controlled, still manages to depict a truly dramatic experience, making it difficult to tell the difference between how Truman truly feels and how Christoph wants him or almost expects him to feel. Peter Weir's way of controlling music through Christoph's character further demonstrates the difference between music of the film capturing Truman's sentiments and music of the TV show displaying Christoph's manipulation. As Eaton also explains in her essay, Christoph's use of Mozart's repeating melodies in Alla Turca to accompany Truman's morning routine is an example of how he displays the perfection and balance that he wants Truman's life to appear as. However, progressively through each cue, Truman defects more and more from his daily routine, getting closer to escaping Christoph's control of his perfect life. The soothing classical music Christoph employs into the show seems to become indifferent to Truman's internally agitated state, representing Truman's fight against his life under manipulation. Contrasting to Alla Turca's role of repetition and routine, in a flashback scene where Truman engages with a forbidden love interest, another classical cue, Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 1 in E minor, is audible in the background. This musical appearance instead serves to display Truman's true emotions, apart from Christoph's control. By becoming separated from the minimalist style of the show, the slow-moving and constantly changing music in this scene reveals Truman's desire to be spontaneous and follow his heart despite how Christoph may want him to feel. This musical scheme of demonstrating multiple viewpoints is what makes the reunion scene captivating in its difficulty to tell what's real and what's controlled about Truman's emotions. At first, it seems as though the music in the scene serves a similar purpose to Chopin's music, meant to reveal Truman's true feelings. But after Christoph visibly controls the musical cue, it becomes more evident that the piano and string melodies are actually quite repetitive, representing more the minimalist style of the TV show. It's almost as if Christoph realizes that the best way to compel his audience is by using music that seems less minimal, less repetitive, and less controlled. On the flip side, Peter Weir might have chosen this to portray Christoph's choice of music, but also with his own intention of displaying the minimalist style to represent Christoph's control. So, in a way, the reunion scene serves to capture Truman's emotions in a dramatic encounter while also refusing to acknowledge his true emotions. Analyzing Weir's use of classical and minimalist music, one of the main purposes that the film's score seems to have in The Truman Show is alternating between representing real emotion and controlled emotion. Weir's film score supports the idea that musical minimalism is often used to appear as if it exists in one's mind, such as Truman, rather than in the external world. Along these lines, the large-scale idea of the film is to show how television producers take away Truman's ability to exist in reality. But when Truman is one step away from escaping his controlled life, he says,
"Never had a camera in my head."
This reveals how ultimately, when it comes to knowing how Truman really feels, apart from Christoph and Weir's own interpretations, the only way to describe his true emotions, musically and otherwise, is by Truman making his own decisions without any outside influence on his life. As represented by the film score, this is something that Truman spends the entire film trying to achieve, and something that, in the end, neither us nor the TV show's audience will ever get to witness. With that said,
In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.